Well, Donald Trump has confessed to the crime of illegal possession of government documents and presidential documents. If reporting tonight in the New York Times is true, it's not theirs, it's mine. Several advisors say Mr. Trump told them. That line in Maggie Haberman's New York Times report tonight is a confession. That is a confession by Donald Trump that he knew he had the documents and had no intention of ever returning the documents to their rightful owner, the United States government. The sentence, "It's not theirs, it's mine," contains all of the elements that federal prosecutors would need to prove the crime of illegal possession of those documents. That quote was reported in Maggie Haberman's article that broke the news that Trump's White House counsel and deputy White House counsel have been interviewed by the FBI about the boxes of government documents at Donald Trump's Florida home that the FBI found in their search warrant. The Times reports Pat A. Cipollone and Patrick F. Philbin, the White House counsel and his deputy under President Donald J. Trump, were interviewed by the FBI in connection with boxes of sensitive documents that were stored at Mr. Trump's residence in Florida after he left office. Three people familiar with the matter said. Mr. Philbin was interviewed in the spring. It was unclear when Mr. Cipollone was interviewed. That means that Attorney General Merrick Garland definitely had the information from the FBI's interview with Patrick Philbin, which was conducted in the spring, while the Attorney General was considering whether to seek a search warrant for Donald Trump's Florida home. The Wall Street Journal reports Attorney General Merrick Garland deliberated for weeks over whether to approve the application for a warrant to search former President Donald Trump's Florida home. People familiar with the matter said the decision had been the subject of weeks of meetings between senior Justice Department and FBI officials. Now that we know that Deputy White House counsel Patrick Philbin definitely spoke with the FBI during that period when Merrick Garland was considering a search warrant, and that White House counsel Pat Cipollone might also have spoken to the FBI during that same period, it strengthens our understanding of why Attorney General Merrick Garland appeared so very confident when he said last week that the decision to seek the search warrant from a judge was made by him.
First, I personally approved the decision to seek a search warrant in this matter. Second, the department does not take such a decision lightly.
Every outgoing president appoints people to be his representatives in dealing with the National Archives to make sure that all presidential papers are properly in the possession of the National Archives. Pat Cipollone and Patrick Philbin are two of the people who Donald Trump officially put in charge of dealing with the National Archives. When the National Archives realized that they didn't have all of the material from Donald Trump that they should have, the New York Times reports that the archives contacted Patrick Philbin. The Times reports Mr. Philbin tried to help the National Archives retrieve the material. Two of the people familiar with the discussions said, but the former president repeatedly resisted entreaties from his advisors. It's not theirs, it's mine. Several advisors say Mr. Trump told them. How many of those several advisors have already told the FBI that when Merrick Garland approved the search warrant? How many of them had already told the FBI that? If that reporting is true, it means that there are several advisors who are witnesses to Donald Trump's confession. It's not theirs, it's mine. On June 3rd, when officials with the Justice Department's National Security Division went to Donald Trump's Florida home to collect documents, one of Donald Trump's lawyers signed a statement saying that all the material with classified markings had now been returned. But that statement was not true. That lawyer now has a decision to make. Take the fall for the crime of lying to the FBI and the crime of concealing illegally obtained government documents, or tell the Justice Department the whole truth about the documents that were found in the FBI's search. There is no attorney-client privilege that prevents a lawyer from revealing communications with a client if the client was urging the lawyer to commit a crime. Last week was the worst legal week of Donald Trump's life, and so far this week is just as bad. Because Donald Trump learned today, just today, that his top lawyers in the White House have both spoken to the FBI about everything they know about the boxes of top secret material that the FBI found in their search of Donald Trump's home. These are the two best witnesses for shooting down the Donald Trump absurdist claim that whenever he took classified material from the office section of the White House to the residence section of the same building, that material then was automatically declassified. On the safe assumption that that is a lie that Donald Trump invented after the FBI search of his home, the people who can prove to the FBI and to a jury that that is a lie are the White House counsel and the White House deputy counsel who would have had to know about such a so-called standing order issued by the president because they would have had to enforce that order. Donald Trump did not know until today that his White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, and his White House deputy counsel, Patrick Philbin, have spoken to the FBI about all of this. Now he knows. Every day of Donald Trump's life now is worse than the day before. And Donald Trump knows that and feels that. Pat Cipollone stood on the floor of the United States Senate and defended Donald Trump in his first impeachment trial, and now Pat Cipollone is cooperating with the FBI investigation of Donald Trump. In that first impeachment trial of Donald Trump in the United States Senate, with Pat Cipollone sitting at the defense table, our first guest tonight said what Pat Cipollone should have known to be true then.
He has betrayed our national security, and he will do so again. He has compromised our elections, and he will do so again. You will not change him. You cannot constrain him. He is who he is. Truth matters little to him. What's right matters even less, and decency matters not at all.